People often talk about preventing problems or sustainable change or let's build the systems that will protect the future. Well, if you want any of that, you need process control. Hello, I'm Tom. Welcome to my channel where I guide you through a practical way to implement operational excellence. And this is such a core part of that system. We're in step 2 of the cycle of control cycle, which is process control. Now, the difference between process control and performance control, because that will be the next one, will also be the next video, is that here we are looking at our process, not per se on what it was doing. So why then is that so important? Because in the end, we just want to make good products. We just want to put services into the market, have good performance, right? So what comes out of the process, that is what we get our money from. That's what it's all about. And that is true. But as you know, especially if you follow my channel, the process, if the inputs are the same, the physics are gonna be making sure that your outputs are also going to be the same. And that is why, if you want any shot at preventing problems or ensuring your performance, you need to be working on that side of the process. So what then is process control? This is where we check the 4 M's, maybe the 5 or 6 M's as you want, right? But going into the process, we have got our machine settings or machine condition. We have got our materials coming in that should be up to specs. We've got our methods laying out exactly how we work, what settings we put in, how the order of operations are. And then we've got manpower, which means that our people, our colleagues, are trained and capable of running the process. Basically, they are capable of doing all of those other M's in a good way and reacting when they don't. So those things we want to check. And you can check this. So we often ask operators to check their lines, their machines, right? Many organizations, many manufacturing organizations for machines will have like a settings list or a settings book where before you start your shift or before you start a run, you go in and with this list you go by the machine. Okay, temperature has to be at that one, setting like this. I'm using die 55B. That's all good. Check, check, check. This is already process control. But this is process control by the operator on their own direct machine, their own direct workplace. Now, where it gets interesting is when you up that through your levels, through your hierarchy levels, your tiers of management. And then you get to how can a manager do process control on the processes in their department. So it's basically a process control on their people, but you go through all of the M's, but especially this is very strong on the method and man M's, because basically what you are checking is, did we follow procedures? Or are we currently following all of our best knowledge and our best procedures? Now, that is a talk between manager and teammate that, by the way, does not need to be in your own team. In fact, it is a sign of a much more mature organization that you do cross-checks, but start out with a direct layered process audit, a layered process control, so directly within your own scope of responsibility as a manager, and then you go broader into the team. So what you have here is sort of management by walking around, but I really hate that, right? So even the term go to Gemba, and especially when we're talking Gemba rounds, as my daughter would say, cringe. The reason is not because it is a bad concept, right? Daiichi Ono drawing a circle on the floor, standing there for 2 or 3 hours to really observe what the process is doing, what the people are doing, that is powerful. But going to the shop floor to do a round and check what is going well, what is not, in my experience always ends up as a useless exercise and creates a lot of extra chaos, usually a lot of actions and frustrations. No. The reason is this talk, it should be about the work. And there is a couple of preconditions that we need to get that to work well. And that is that it should be an open discussion, right? People should be allowed to speak freely here. This is an internal process audit. So we want to know about the problems. And then the thing, we want to know about these standards. So talk about the standards, not about the output, but the input standards. Of course, when you do a walk around, especially if you have like a short interval controller, a frequent round where a team leader goes around their department, around their area, they will also talk about, did you hit your performance? Are you making the volumes at the cost, the quality, stuff like that. Definitely output factors are a thing there, but when we're talking process control, this should be part of such rounds and organized as separate rounds. It is about those input standards mainly, but it is also about, can we actually do the standards? And how can the manager, or it's not per se, as I said, your line manager, but how can this manager support the operator, technician, planner? Because let's face it, this can happen, this should happen for any process. And as a team leader, you may not touch the lines anymore so much, but you definitely have standardized processes that you also need to be doing. So any process can be checked. Just start with operations, right? Start with the Gemba, the shop floor. And it is about, is there anything that is right now hindering you to perform those tasks as we want to? Because usually there are. What needs to change? That the operator is not working exactly according to standards or the standard, right? And now I'm not saying, please operators, go and mess up the standards, go do whatever you think is better. But when you start with process control, when this is relatively new to your organization, as a manager, please adopt the mindset that your systems don't have good standards and that you need to support your people to be able to work towards the good standards, to work in the good standards. If, for instance, I see this so often, it's a common safety standard that you have to normally switch off a line just by clicking on the stop buttons, not the emergency stop, before you open any part of the line. Because if you just open the little safety doors, it triggers one of the emergency stops, and it's not a good way of stopping for the machine and for the product. But if your control panel is on this side of the line, you've got a huge line, and you're now trying to fix something on the other end of the line. You're over there, you need to quickly stop it. There is no control panel there, so you just open a door, your problem solved. In this case, you don't want people running around the line, they're not even allowed to run, to get to the control panel anyway. You just made a bad system, right? They cannot work according to the standard because the system doesn't support it. And this happens so much. So when you really start with process control, and this is not the Gemba walks. Gemba walks, they tend to just focus on all kinds of negativity and small things. When you really look at what's my standard, how are we doing it in practice, and then with an honest, open view, look at why are they not doing everything exactly according to the standard? What is in their way to really do it like that and fix those systems? Oh, then you're gonna make miles. Then you're really going to be improving the systems in your organization. And that is gonna help you to cement the change, to support the way of doing things. Now, this is what we want, right? So how do we then get to the system where you can have an audit, because that's basically what it is, that still feels like you can speak freely about what is helping or hindering you, about especially the input standards, but about standards, we need to know what it is about, that has the goal to support the person that you're controlling, whose processes you're controlling, and that focuses on your organizational systems. Well, for that, you need to have a couple of things sort of in place to help you. And that is about the rounds themselves. They should be focused and they should be frequent. And what do I mean with that? Just pick one of these standards, and this is where a Gemba round usually goes wrong, because a Gemba round, but also quite often a safety round, you think, oh, that's just one topic. If your safety round or your quality round is a round over the whole department, spanning multiple operators, and it is about all of your safety standards, and it takes about an hour, 1.5 hours, I see these so often, something's gonna be wrong, right? Unless you are really tiptoe perfect factory, but something's gonna be wrong. Now, if you truly focus on one or a very small cluster of standards, for instance, machine settings at the cutting machine. You go there, you talk with the operator, you can just have them explain to you what they did, how they know it's correct, where they get the info, all those things, right? You're going to go through all of the 4Ms and the instruction. You will have had to have read the instruction beforehand. You sort of need to know what you're talking about, even if you cannot do it yourself. But you focus on that. And then if the outcome is nicely checked, settings are in place, operator knows what they're doing, then the good thing is that you can congratulate. Because that way, with a focused control target, there is a big chance that things are okay. Right? If you're only checking one standard, one sort of setting, or maybe a small cluster of settings that is focused, there's a good chance things are okay. The same goes for those safety rounds, right? Safety rounds, I seriously advise you to do it in the form of this process control as well, which is, let's only check personal protective equipment today, and maybe even only that at these two lines that form a sort of a block. The chance that your operators are wearing their safety equipment, their personal protective equipment, in the whole department or the whole factory at this moment is so low. But the chance that they're wearing it at this more high impact zone that you have decided to check today is high, and that way you can hand out a compliment. And the message will be the same, because if people see you come back and ask about these standards time and time again, and not just your own manager, but even at some point people from other departments come and check it, the message will be there. These are important standards. And that's the other part. If your safety audit or whatever assessment you have takes an hour, 1.5, 2 hours, or some audits even longer, but those are usually the certification audits. If it takes so long, you're not going to do it frequently. You're going to do this, what I often see, once a month, right? Or even in the case of safety leadership audits, I often hear that our company safety is number one, and that's why we have a very active safety leadership audit system. These are 1.5 hour really deep down audits, and we have 12 of them per year. With our 8 people leadership team, that means that you either have to do 1 or 2 per year. Come on, that's not frequent. That's not even a very serious auditing system. They want to check way too much. And the thing is, if you do it with such a low frequency, then you're gonna see spot problems, today problems. No. What we want is that you go in there and you check the same standard, and you can have several rounds, but the same standard a number of times. If there is a big problem that immediately makes clear that there is a systemic issue underneath, go and action it. Have it fixed immediately. But if we see those things that don't really require immediate action, or at least you want to sort of check, how about if we check that standard 7 times, 10 times, and most of those times we see roughly the same sort of problem popping up. Every time it was not so big that you immediately want to put big action on it, but there is a very clear thread going through all of those observations. That is leading you to think in the systems underlying the behavior. And so you can support your people to meet the standards. It makes a totally different type of conversation. If every one of these process controls comes back with 2, 3 actions, not even that much, I want to do these several times a week, several times a day maybe even. So 2 or 3 actions, way too much. Most of these process controls should not even have a very big direct action. Maybe a small re-instruction directly at the line or a small course correction right there, and no things with all the standards. If this was a one-off, doesn't matter. Because if you know that the same standard will be checked relatively frequently, then somebody else is going to pick it up as well. They will have your result. If the same minor thingy repeats, that's a systemic issue. We need to do something about the systems. If, Joe checked it last week and he found a small problem, we checked it this week and it's not there, then okay, ignore it for now. These are 10 to 20 minute type of rounds, and that's also why we want operational managers to do, well, at least one a week, all of them. I would even say that the real direct operational managers, like team leads, like area supervisors, they should do 3 a week, something like that, or maybe even 1 daily. And so in your management team, easily a 6 or 8 person team with a second layer of direct team leads underneath of another 8 or so. So you've got 20 audits a week, something like that. That is what we want to get into, that type of rhythm. Now, maybe you say, oh, that's too much. Okay, so aim at 2 to 3 audits by somebody somewhere in your team every day. Do remember, we're only checking 1 standard per audit. So we do want to have a whole bunch of audits. And it helps you to strengthen the message. Often, small repetitions, more samples, that gives you the info. But also, it sends the message. Oh, apparently it's important to do the moisture control for quality because later down the line, this creates huge problems for us. The fact alone that you're frequently controlling on a focused parameters, a focused set of standards, immediately indicates that these standards are important. That is also how we pick them. Because we pick them based on how important they are and what the chance is that it goes wrong. If we have, that by the way is even one of the systems, if we have a standard that we have checked 10 times and all 10 times it was fine, take it off the list, right? I mean, this is apparently ingrained in your business. Please, maybe we'll check it again, like a sampling in a year or so or half a year, but stop checking it right now. Focus your energy on those things where you want to put it. And how can you do that? It's either of strategic importance. You can say, well, we need to be checking our critical control points from the food industry. Hazard analysis, critical control point identification. Those critical control points, they need to be good. Okay, that's a good reason, even if you know it will be fine. Or you can say, well, we always want to have a couple of safety topics. Fine. The topic of the month usually is met with laughter, but in this case, in the case of process control, the topic of the month is actually a really good thing. If the whole management team says, okay, this month, one of our rounds is going to be on wearing your helmets in the correct way, right? We saw a couple of incidents. It leads us to believe that maybe this is something we really need to focus on. Let's have 10% of our process controls be on that specific safety equipment. Good, right? Strategic choice for something that is important. Either you've seen it go wrong, or you think it just needs some strengthening, or you want to communicate it. And new standards, so stuff that is recently changed, they of course have the highest chance of not being adopted fully. So that's also what you want, and that is why this is such a great tool for sustaining change, for baking those improvements into your daily operation. As soon as your improve loop, your improvement teams, your Kaizen teams, your domaics, they have delivered their result, they have trained people in a new standard, some new tools, new way of working that is going to lead to better results, they have been changing these inputs. Maybe not all of them, but quite likely, honestly. So that needs to be unlearning the old way, learning the new way, making it our new habit. It's still a bit new, it's still a bit fresh, but it was apparently important for our performance. So check it. And this is such a great way to also motivate your improvement team members, because it's management taking their input, they will say things like, well, we have discovered that the number of trays in our transport system should not be higher than 10 because it clogs up, but it can also not be lower than 8 because then the line bleeds out. So 8, 9 or 10 is the only acceptable number of carts in the transport system. Please, managers, go check it. It is so great. And those managers, they wanted the team to do OEE improvement, or they wanted the jamming of your assembly line to go down, something like that, right? The performance KPI. And you can tell them, yes, we found the reason, as an improvement team, we found the reason, we found the inputs that are critical, now please go check it. Isn't it wonderful if your managers then indeed go onto the floor and from time to time, they have sort of a roster, and I can explain all the details on that as well, just contact me for such things, but they go onto the floor and they check it, and they can explain also to the operator, like, you know, we heard that this improvement team led by Katie, she told me that, you know, we really need 8, 9 or 10 of these transporters on the logistics system, because otherwise we get into trouble. You get feedback, you get management involvement, you get a reminder of, oh yes, Katie was indeed doing that improvement team, I know, and I was in the other shift, but nice. Apparently it's important to managers as well. This hugely helps the implementation success of that improvement team as well. And you're gonna check to make it a habit. Now, if you've ever read like Atomic Habits or Tiny Habits, there's this theory of you have to repeat it about 20 to 30 times before it becomes a habit. You don't really have time for that in the course of an improvement team. You want to, if you've got a 3-month improvement team, the first half is spent on designing the countermeasures, the new things anyway. Then you need some sustained time. Basically, you got only a couple of weeks to really be checking after you have implemented stuff. You need the organization to pick it up for another half a year or so. That is why in your cycle of control, you have process control as a super important factor. This is how you do it. You check the inputs. It is speaking. Basically, you look and discuss. Don't just draw conclusions. Manager to person doing the job. This does not have to be your own manager. This can hopefully also be cross-departmental. We need to have an open conversation, so speak freely. It's about the standards, not the person, although executing the standards is what the person should be doing. It's about supporting them, making sure that they can do it. Now, if they have all the tools, they just don't want it, that's a different conversation, and you will have it at that moment. But 80% of the time, they are actually running into something, and that something is in your organizational systems. That is where you focus your change. Do small topic rounds often and pick them either for their strategic importance or because they're a new habit or a new standard that hasn't become a habit yet. This way you can actually sustain those improvements and you can work proactively, because that part is still about the leading indicators. And in the next video we will be talking about performance control, how to check the outputs of your process. Hope to see you there. In the meantime, if this is interesting for your organization, and it is for so many organizations, this is the stuff I help companies with. So if that is something you want training on, you want guidance on, you want me to come fly out to your factory and build this up together and train your management and really set this up, I am more than happy to do that. And of course, if you just have a smaller question, put it down in the comments. I'm happy to share my experience on that as well. For now, I wish you the best of luck controlling your processes. And as always, don't forget to enjoy the continuous improvement journey.